I'm totally thrilled by this, especially to have Jennifer kicking off this program for the Aspen Institute, because to me it's one of the key things we could be doing now. I was telling the mayor that in New Orleans after the storm 9.5 years ago, it was the innovators who came in and tied innovation to the community that made it work. You know, we all thought in the digital age that people could work wherever they wanted and sort of phone or Skype it in. It happens that when you're an innovator, you want to be around others. You want to be in creative places. That's what this beautiful space here is all about. Eric Lavin, standing in the back there, is doing a social entrepreneur and business entrepreneur innovation lab at the Aspen Institute for young entrepreneurs. People want to be together.
That's
and
right.
so I wanted to start by asking you about your vision, which you've been explaining for the past month, of tying innovation to the needs of communities, neighborhoods, and real people.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I want to thank the Aspen Institute for your real commitment, because I think you share our values about how we connect tech and innovation to the real problems and challenges and opportunities in cities. And so that's exactly what we see tech and innovation able to do for us in DC. I ran on a promise, and I'm running a government that's built around spreading opportunities all across the city, across all of the district's 8 wards. And we know that technology and innovation can do that for us. So we had a fun program, and it turns out that my staff really ran me all over the city all month, celebrating innovation and during the month of May. And we built our innovation strategies around connecting technologists to the underserved communities in DC. We have, like other cities, significant gaps in educational achievement, in access to jobs and economic development and health outcomes. And we're really focused on how we close those gaps. So just a couple of examples of what we did during the month. We launched a partnership with Howard University that happens to be on our digital corridor along the 7th Street and Georgia Avenue corridor. We announced that we would focus on girls and attracting girls to tech, and we happen to be the city that's best for female technologists in the United States. You know, the girls are running this city now, Walter, and so we want to make sure that we're attracting women in tech.
We had it for one.
Yeah. So we are also building on a lot of leading in a lot of ways. We have a pretty robust DC net and a connection that allows us to connect 250 community organizations to high-speed internet at a lower cost. We also have 75% of our schools connected to high-speed internet. So we're building on all of those things during Innovation. And a real fun thing that we announced during Innovation was having free Wi-Fi at all of our parks and recreation centers. So you can see by doing that and by focusing on our students and by focusing on partnerships with 1776, for example, to really locate our high potential students and get them connected to tech in our underserved areas.
You know, to build on that, one of the great questions about technology and innovation is whether it will shrink or widen the inequality gap that we have. How do you see it?
Well, I think that we have to be more intentional about focusing resources. And one thing that I've noticed is that the market and the technologists are going to find ways to connect tech to profitable endeavors. And part of the role of government is to connect tech solutions where profit might not lead people. And I challenged everybody that came to work for me that we're going to focus on solutions that help us in the human services, for example. We launched a very significant effort for the first time in the District of Columbia to commit to ending homelessness in our nation's capital. And it is a robust program. It's going to take a lot of money, and it's going to take a lot of solutions that we haven't thought of before. I had a simple question for everybody who wanted to help me manage the city, and that was, how do we stop having people wait in line for basic benefits? outside, long lines, cold, rain, you name it. If we can figure out how to make it easier to get a ride in our city using technology or park in our city using technology, we can figure out how to connect people to food stamp programs and TANF programs, but more importantly, job training programs that will help them get on the pathway to the middle class.
What about your coding camps and things like that? Because one of the problems of the inequality is kids from Northwest can always learn how to code. You grew up in Northeast.
I did, and I can't code.
Well, you know, we have a class right outside.
I did once.
You can learn anything.
I can learn anything, and you know, gratefully, I was raised with that expectation that I could learn anything. But what you raise is how we use our school system, and our deputy mayor for education is here, and I know she's been very active with Aspen. Jenny Niles is here.
Thanks, good to see you.
But the key is to make learning about the STEM fields part of every aspect of what we do from a very early age. And we want to make it fun. And so part of our challenge in our schools, and we're very committed to and have been for the last 8 years in transforming our schools and make sure there are equal opportunities all across the city. But we can do better around the STEM fields. We know that whatever your job is in the future, you're going to have some competency around science, technology, and engineering, and we want that to be part of everything that we do. But not just in the schools. Part of our coding camps are at parks and recreation. So after-school activities, summer activities can focus on STEM, on the STEM fields and activities, and making them fun.
How do we all get involved in that? I mean, should Google be running a summer camp?
Yes, Google should take, they should take, we have 14,000 young people signed up for summer jobs, and Google can certainly work with some of them. We have a focus also on 22 to 24-year-olds that may be disconnected from school and jobs that I think Google can definitely help us with. Google and others can help us coach and train other people to train our students and young people. And get involved. In addition to Parks and Rec and our libraries, we're going to have a maker spaces, and we're always looking for volunteers to help us run those spaces.
I know we'll be followed by people from the Case Foundation will be on the next panel.
Good.
And I was riding on the Rise of the Rest bus with Steve and Jean Case as we went from Charleston, Nashville, and then down to New Orleans a month ago, talking about how cities that aren't in Silicon Valley are trying to be part of a Rise of the Rest because they're connecting their core strengths to innovation. What is it you see that's the core strength that Washington will bring to this?
Well, we are attracting a lot of young people to this city, and we have done it, and we are attracting a lot of technologists to the city as well, kind of organically. We have a growing entertainment and creative economy. We have great restaurants. We have great opportunities for people. And so now what we have really focused on doing is how do we get in the gaps where the technologists are telling us this is what we need in Washington. And so making sure we're a good place to do business for technologists, a good place for people to move around and have opportunity, a good place to attract capital to invest in these companies. That will be our key. And so the message that we like to spread that Washington is more than the Capitol and the White House. People live here, they raise families here, they're building fantastic businesses here, in hiring a lot of great Washingtonians.
One of the things that surprised me on the Rise of the Rest tour, people would come on the bus or come on the Mardi Gras float in New Orleans and make pitches. Only half dealt with technology. We sometimes conflate innovation and technology, but there were people doing innovation in food, in social services, in
Absolutely.
oyster reefs and wetland restoration. Talk us about non-tech innovation.
Well, this is one thing that my staff had got me focused on this month as well. And I'll tell you that we started off the month, we really kicked off innovation by talking about small businesses. And Anna R. Harvey, who directs our small and local business department, is is also here. And so how we are creating great CEOs is also part of our innovation efforts. Another way that we're taking innovation out and focusing on non-tech innovation is through the arts. We have a wonderful arts commission. I see one of our commissioners, Rona Friedman, is here, and how we are better investing in the creative economy in Washington.
Give me an example of arts connecting to innovation.
One thing that we just launched were innovation districts, where we're looking at land that we already own, parks that we've already invested in, and using them as a platform for artists or other innovators. So whether it's music or whether it's the visual arts, we're going to make those districts available to our growing creative class.
One of the great places for innovation is the education sector.
You bet.
And it comes generally from empowering innovative leaders to have some autonomy in running schools, whether it's charter, district, whatever. I think you're the second.
You're talking our language.
Right. Well, I'll let you then just take it from there.
Well, certainly. Well, you know that we, families in the District of Columbia, have a lot of choices, and our focus now is how we leverage our public education dollar. So whether it's in the traditional public schools or it's in our public charter school sector, we are looking for ways to kind of spark that competition between great thinkers around education. And it's working. That's what we found. We're really at a place now in Washington where we're just making sure that we're getting the most out of every public education dollar when we look at our two sectors. And that's part of why Jenny is here. You may know that Jenny founded, and she's going to have her first graduating class from E.L. Haynes Public Charter School. But I brought, she was the founder, cool. Yes. But we brought her into the government. And it took a lot of, work on my part. But we got her into the government because part of our opportunity now is to make sure that a pretty mature public charter school sector and our traditional public schools that we're leveraging the two sectors and that they're not like feeding off of each other. And so that's a challenge that we're working with now. And Jenny is the one to lead that effort.
So how do Jenny, Kaya, and then the charter school sector help spur each other to innovation rather than fight each other?
Well, I think that we have seen, and this is one thing I know about parents, that they vote with their feet. So when they have a really good program, whether it's in the traditional public schools or in the public charter schools, that's where they're going to go. I think that we can do better by learning the best practices one from the other. And Jenny is going to help us do that. So we have one of our public charter schools that is doing X really well. Then we want more people to learn about that. And the same is true for our traditional public schools. And so I think personally that there are things that DC public schools will do really, really well, and we're going to double down on those things. And then where the parents want choices in other areas, they'll make those choices as well.
I'm going to use this opportunity just to mention that we at the Aspen Institute have recruited Raj Vinakota, who founded the Seed Academies, to do youth engagement and education. I've worked with Ann Friedman quite a bit, who's been chair of the Seed Academy, so that we're going to try to work with you, I hope, on this. What field is most ripe for innovation now? If you could just, boom, hit something hard here.
I think the human services are. I think that we've done a lot in transportation. So how we have a big focus in DC over our workforce training dollars right now. And we spend $100 million every year, and we're not that clear on what we're getting for those $100 million. We know the people in our city that need to be connected to sustainable employment. Largely, we know where the skills gaps are. So we, I think, can use innovation and tech, especially technology, to make sure we're making better use of those dollars and better connecting people to opportunity.
You grew up in Northeast. I think
I
you
did.
went to Elizabeth Seton, a Catholic parochial school.
Yes.
And you saw the innovation grow up in your neighborhood. I mean, Northeast is starting, have innovation corridors too. Tell us your personal experiences and how they help inform what you do. I'm a biographer.
You're
I tend to get personal
okay.
at times.
I got it. I wasn't
An amateur
expecting that one, but
biographer.
so I think my personal experience just would suggest that I was raised with a high value on education, high value on being able to take a lot of information and persuade other people. That's why I do politics, and also to challenge myself to areas that don't come as easily to me. And so that's why when I walk around the city and talk about technology and talk to girls and talk to underserved communities, I always challenge them to not think it's too hard or not go into the science fields because it doesn't come as easy to them, and not be fooled by the notion that whatever job they have in the future won't require them to be competent in the science, technology, engineering, and math fields. And so we're really pushing people to explore all of their talents, and even if the core of their talent isn't in technology, to be competent, because they're going to need it to compete.
You said you'll be mayor of all of the city. Explain what you're going to do in Anacostia to make sure they're part of this whole process.
Well, Anacostia is actually, I think there's so much promise for Anacostia, not just all of not just Anacostia, but all of Ward 8 and Ward 7. Oftentimes in Washington, when people talk about closing gaps, they're talking about our east of the river communities with west of the river communities. And I'll just tell you this. I do a conference every year to talk to retailers about coming to Washington, and I use it as kind of a bellwether of what's happening in each of the city's 8 wards. And more, we have just about all the retailers that we want. We just don't have them every place that we want. And this year, I almost fell off my chair because I really think there's going to be a race to get into Anacostia in my first term. And so that's what we know is really coming. So how do we prepare communities for that type of interest and investment? Because we know what happens when you get a big retailers go in. Other people follow with big incomes, housing prices soar, and before you know it, the people that have lived there forever don't live there anymore. So we have had that experience in many places in our cities, some faster than others. So I think that we have the opportunity to get in front of it to prepare residents and small businesses for the huge price demands that are going to come their way. Now, before I was mayor, I was a ward council member, and so I've had the opportunity to usher in a lot of development projects, to invest in affordable housing all over the city. And people love progress. And believe me, we love the progress that Washington has experienced. But with progress comes that anxiety. And so I always start my conversations with the community with this: nothing stays the same. It's going to get better. It's going to get worse. I choose better. And so how we implement better in Anacostia and other parts of our city is the challenge that Brian has, who's the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development, and he's here and working with our Deputy Mayor for Greater Economic Opportunity, whose job it is to help us close these gaps.
One of the interesting things you've just raised is the resistance to what I will call gentrification. Mm-hmm. And Richard Florida writes about when the creative classes come in and the innovators come in. We've seen that a bit on 14th Street corridor. Yeah, yes. A lot. You're probably seeing it on 8th Street in your old segment of town. And now you're saying it could happen to Anacostia. How do you balance that, where you get innovation, you get young entrepreneurs in, you get small businesses in, but they displace people?
Well, I think that we haven't done as well as I think we could have or should have with more intentional planning in advance of where we saw corridors rapidly change was when the metro came in, or we saw it on 8th Street when we put the streetcar tracks, which will run soon. We'll run. By
the way, what will happen when those streetcars run? Will that change?
It's already changed. The promise of streetcar changed things, attracted an investment, and I would argue that it came with the public infusion of hundreds of millions of dollars. We saw it with Metro. We see it with streetcar. So I suggest that we could have done things better. So right now we're looking, for example, to the property that the district owns and making sure that we're leveraging inclusive housing all over the city in advance of where we see the next wave of investment.
And finally, because I know you have to go, what could people in this room do to make sure that every kid in Washington, every summer, every after school, every whatever, has a chance for a job, a chance to become an innovator, an entrepreneur?
Well, I think that part of my job, and I realized this early on, was to make the big asks, and you know about the big asks. And so we can I have a program, for example, that the council didn't fund for next summer. That's about $2 million that would put 1,000 22 to 24-year-olds to work. So we will go out and look for some private investment, $2 million, 1,000 people that will put them on the pathway to the middle class. The chancellor has a initiative right now where we can transform every library in our DC public schools. It's going to cost about $15 million. And the big ask that we have is for $5 million investment. We're going to raise $5 million, and we have another $5 million commitment so that every school library can be transformed. And so that's one of the big asks that we have. We have a 500 for 500 challenge where we, as part of our Boys and Men of Color initiative, which we are raising $20 million privately. Can I say we're almost halfway there? And a part of that challenge, in addition to building a specialty school, we're focusing on literacy and early intervention, and we need 500 mentors to work with boys that have been identified that need literacy training. So everybody here can do that.
How do you just sign up? Go to
DC Public Schools, and you can find us at dc.gov and look for DC Public Schools and sign up for the 500 for 500.
Sounds great. Well, thank you. I can think of no better way to kick off our Center for Urban Innovation and what Jen Bradley, Eric Lavin, and others are doing. I know you have to leave, but I want to give you a round of applause and maybe give you just a moment to say hello to people in the room.